The small town of Ridgewood was known for its quiet streets, friendly neighbors, and picturesque parks where families often gathered on weekends. It was the kind of place where nothing much seemed to happen, until one evening when an encounter between a police officer and a young woman would shake the entire community to its core. Officer Greg Mitchell had been patrolling the area that day, his mind preoccupied with thoughts of dinner and complaints from his wife about their mounting bills. He wasn't paying attention to his surroundings as he drove slowly down Main Street, sipping coffee from a paper cup while scrolling through social media on his phone. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, but Greg barely noticed. His focus was elsewhere, far removed from the responsibilities of his badge. It was then that a figure appeared beside his car, a young woman wearing a plain hoodie, faded jeans, and sneakers. She stood quietly, almost hesitantly, her hands clutching a half-empty bottle of water. Her dark skin glistened faintly under the streetlights and her eyes held a look of calm determination. For a moment she simply stared at him, waiting for him to acknowledge her presence. But Greg didn't see her as a person. Instead, his mind immediately jumped to stereotypes fueled by years of unchecked bias. Without rolling down his window or asking what she wanted, he frowned deeply and leaned back in his seat, annoyed by the interruption. "What do you want?" he finally barked, his voice sharp and dismissive. The girl didn't flinch. Instead, she raised the bottle of water slightly and asked softly, "Could you spare some change? I just need enough to buy something to eat." Greg's expression hardened further. To him, this request felt like yet another attempt to take advantage of his position. He rolled down his window only partially, glaring at her as though she were somehow beneath him. "Get out of here," he snapped, his tone laced with disdain. Then, without warning, he reached out, grabbed the bottle of water from her hand, and poured its contents onto the pavement. The liquid splashed loudly against the ground, catching the attention of a few passers-by who glanced over curiously. "That's what we do to freeloaders," he said coldly, tossing the empty bottle back at her feet. The girl stood still, her face unreadable as she processed what had just happened. There was no anger in her eyes, no visible sign of hurt, just a quiet strength that made Greg feel strangely uneasy. After a long pause, she turned and walked away, leaving him alone with his guilt-ridden thoughts. As the girl disappeared into the distance, Greg tried to shake off the strange feeling that lingered in the pit of his stomach. He told himself it was nothing, that he'd handled the situation exactly as he should have. People like her always had ulterior motives, he reasoned, trying to justify his actions. Still, something about her demeanor stuck with him. She hadn't argued or begged like others might have. Instead, she'd carried herself with a dignity that seemed unusual for someone supposedly seeking handouts. Shaking his head, Greg decided to push the incident out of his mind and refocused on his phone screen. However, before he could fully distract himself, another patrol car pulled up beside him. Out stepped Captain Lisa Monroe, the newly appointed police chief who had recently transferred to Ridgewood. Word around the station was that she was tough, fair, and unafraid to hold officers accountable for misconduct. As she approached, Greg couldn't help but notice how strikingly familiar she looked to the girl he'd dismissed moments earlier. The same sharp features, the same steady gaze. A knot formed in his stomach as he watched her walk toward him. "Captain." Monroe greeted him curtly, her tone professional but firm. "Officer Mitchell, I need to speak with you privately," she said, motioning for him to follow her. Confused and increasingly nervous, Greg obeyed, trailing behind her to a secluded corner near their vehicles. Once they were alone, she crossed her arms and fixed him with an intense stare that made him squirm. "Tell me, Officer Mitchell, how do you treat people who ask for help?" she began, her voice steady but cutting. Greg blinked, caught off guard by the question. I try to assist them whenever possible," he stammered, though his words lacked sincerity. Captain Monroe's lips curled into a faint smirk, one that sent chills down his spine. "Funny, because not 10 minutes ago you humiliated a young woman who merely asked for a little kindness. You poured water on her and called her a freeloader." Greg's heart sank. How did she know? Had someone witnessed the incident? Panic started to creep in as he searched for an explanation, but Captain Monroe cut him off before he could speak. "That young woman happens to be my niece, and now, thanks to your actions, she has lost all respect for law enforcement." Greg's mind raced as he struggled to process what he'd just heard. The girl, the one he'd treated so cruelly, was Captain Monroe's niece. He felt sick to his stomach, realizing the gravity of his mistake. Desperation took hold of him and he began pleading, "Captain Monroe, please, I swear I didn't mean any harm. If I'd known who she was." His voice trailed off, the feebleness of his excuse becoming painfully obvious. Captain Monroe raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. "If you'd known who she was? So you're saying you only show decency when it benefits you? That tells me everything I need to know about your character." She paused, letting her words sink in. "You've got two options. Either resign quietly or I'll make sure every officer in this state hears about your behavior today. Your choice." Greg's hands trembled as he weighed his options. For once, he understood the weight of accountability and the consequences of his prejudice. In the days that followed, word of Greg's resignation spread quickly throughout the precinct. Some officers clapped sarcastically, while others whispered about karma finally catching up to him. Meanwhile, Captain Monroe wasted no time implementing reforms aimed at fostering better relationships between law enforcement and the community. She organized training sessions focused on racial sensitivity and de-escalation techniques, determined to prevent incidents like the one involving Greg from happening again. During one such session, she shared part of her own story, how growing up as a black woman in a predominantly white neighborhood had taught her resilience and empathy. Her speech resonated deeply with many officers, inspiring them to reflect on their biases and attitudes. Slowly but surely, the culture within the department began to shift, paving the way for a brighter future. As the days turned into weeks, the ripple effects of Greg Mitchell's actions and subsequent downfall began to spread throughout Ridgewood. What had started as a seemingly isolated incident quickly grew into a topic of heated discussion. At dinner tables, coffee shops, and town hall meetings, the community was divided. Some residents praised Captain Lisa Monroe for taking swift action against misconduct, while others defended Greg, claiming he'd been set up or unfairly targeted because of his race. Tensions simmered beneath the surface, threatening to boil over as opinions clashed. Meanwhile, Captain Monroe remained steadfast in her mission to rebuild trust between law enforcement and the people they served. She knew that change wouldn't come overnight, but she also understood that every small step mattered. Her resolve only strengthened when she received letters from members of the community thanking her for standing up for justice. One afternoon, Captain Monroe decided to visit her niece Tanya, the young woman who had unknowingly played such a pivotal role in exposing Greg's prejudice. Tanya lived with her grandmother in a modest apartment on the outskirts of town, far from the prying eyes of gossip-hungry neighbors. When Lisa arrived, she found Tanya sitting by the window reading a book. Despite everything that had happened, Tanya appeared calm and composed, though there was a hint of sadness in her expression. "How are you holding up?" Lisa asked gently, sitting down beside her. Tanya shrugged, closing her book and setting it aside. "I'm okay," she replied softly. "But I can't stop thinking about how differently things might have gone if I hadn't been your niece. Would anyone have cared about what happened to me? Would anyone have believed me?" Her words struck Lisa like a punch to the gut. She reached out and placed a hand on Tanya's shoulder, her voice trembling slightly. "You're right. It shouldn't take someone being related to the police chief for their voice to matter. That's why I'm working so hard to make sure no one else has to go through what you did." Tanya nodded, her gaze fixed on the floor. "It's not just about me, Aunt Lisa. It's about all the other people who've been treated the same way or worse and never got a chance to tell their story." Lisa felt a lump rise in her throat. She had always known racism and bias existed within institutions like law enforcement, but hearing it articulated so plainly by her own flesh and blood made it feel more personal than ever. Determined to honor Tanya's experience, Lisa vowed to push even harder for systemic change. Over the next few weeks, She worked tirelessly to introduce new policies aimed at fostering accountability and transparency. Body cameras became mandatory for all officers, and disciplinary actions were clearly outlined for cases involving abuse of power or discriminatory behavior. Lisa also established a citizen advisory board where residents could voice concerns directly to the department's leadership. Slowly but surely, these efforts began to yield results, earning grudging respect even from those who had initially doubted her intentions. Meanwhile, Greg Mitchell struggled to adjust to life after losing his badge. At first, he convinced himself that he had been unjustly punished, that Captain Monroe had singled him out because of his race or some hidden vendetta. But as time passed, reality began to sink in. No one wanted to hire a disgraced ex-cop, especially not in a small town where rumors traveled faster than wildfire. Greg found himself applying for jobs outside Ridgewood, often lying about why he had left his previous position. Yet even when he managed to secure an interview, something always gave him away. A nervous twitch, a defensive tone, or the shadow of guilt lingering in his eyes. Each rejection chipped away at his confidence, until he barely recognized the man he used to be. Nights were the hardest. Alone in his cramped apartment, Greg replayed the encounter with Tanya over and over in his mind, torturing himself with questions. Why hadn't he shown her basic human decency? Why had he let his biases dictate his actions? And most painfully, could he have prevented this downward spiral if he had simply chosen kindness? Greg's struggles didn't go unnoticed by those closest to him. His wife, Sarah, tried to support him at first, urging him to take responsibility for his mistakes and move forward. But as his bitterness grew, so did the strain on their marriage. Arguments became frequent, often escalating into shouting matches that left both of them drained. One evening, after yet another failed job application, Greg snapped. "This is all her fault," he shouted, slamming his fist on the kitchen table. "That girl and her aunt ruined my life." Sarah stared at him, tears welling up in her eyes. "No, Greg," she said firmly. "They didn't ruin your life. You did that yourself. You chose to treat someone like garbage because of the color of their skin. Until you own up to that, you'll never get past this." Her words hit him like a ton of bricks, forcing him to confront the truth he had been avoiding for months. Defeated, Greg sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands, as sobs racked his body. For the first time since the incident, he allowed himself to truly feel the weight of his shame. Back in Ridgewood, Captain Monroe continued to lead by example, proving that real change was possible. Under her guidance, the police department partnered with local schools to host workshops on diversity and inclusion, teaching students about the importance of treating everyone with respect, regardless of their background. She also spearheaded initiatives to improve relations with marginalized communities, organizing events where officers could interact with residents in non-confrontational settings. These efforts paid off in unexpected ways. Crime rates dropped significantly, and surveys showed a marked increase in public satisfaction with law enforcement. Even skeptics began to admit that Lisa's reforms were making a difference. Still, Lisa knew there was much work left to be done. Racism wasn't something that could be eradicated overnight. It required constant vigilance and effort. But for the first time in years, she felt hopeful about the future. As months turned into a year, the transformation in Ridgewood became undeniable. Neighbors who had once avoided each other now exchanged warm greetings on the street. Parents felt safe letting their children play outside again, knowing that the officers patrolling the area genuinely cared about their well-being. Tanya, too, noticed the shift. Inspired by her aunt's dedication, she decided to pursue a career in social work, determined to help others overcome adversity. Watching her niece thrive filled Lisa with pride, reminding her of why she had fought so hard to create a better world. As for Greg, he eventually moved out of state, seeking a fresh start in a place where no one knew his name. While he still carried the scars of his past, he had begun to take tentative steps toward redemption, volunteering at a local shelter and learning to see people for who they truly were, rather than the stereotypes he had once clung to. In the end, the incident served as a powerful reminder. Our choices define us, but they don't have to imprison us forever. Change is always possible, if we're willing to face the truth and embrace it. As the months rolled on, Ridgewood began to feel like a different town altogether. The air seemed lighter, the streets more vibrant, and the interactions between residents warmer than they had been in years. Captain Lisa Monroe's relentless efforts to reshape the police department were paying off in ways that extended far beyond the badge. People who had once feared or distrusted law enforcement now approached officers with a sense of ease, sharing concerns openly and even offering gratitude for their service. It wasn't just about policy changes or training programs, though those were crucial. It was about the cultural shift Lisa had ignited. Officers started viewing themselves not as enforcers, but as protectors and partners in building a safer, kinder community. Slowly, the walls of suspicion and resentment began to crumble, replaced by bridges of understanding. Lisa often found herself reflecting on how far they'd come since the night she confronted Greg Mitchell. That moment had been a turning point, not just for her department, but for her personally. She realized that leadership wasn't just about making tough decisions. It was about inspiring others to rise above their flaws and embrace accountability. One evening, as she sat at her desk reviewing reports, she thought back to Tanya's words during their conversation weeks earlier. It's about all the other people who've been treated the same way, or worse, and never got a chance to tell their story. Those words had stayed with Lisa, fueling her determination to ensure no one else would suffer in silence. Her mind drifted to the countless stories she had heard over the years, stories of injustice, pain, and resilience. Each one reminded her why she had chosen this path in the first place. With renewed resolve, Lisa picked up her pen and began drafting plans for a new initiative. A public forum where residents could share their experiences with law enforcement, both good and bad, without fear of retaliation. The idea took shape. Quickly, and within weeks, posters announcing the forum appeared around town. "Your voice matters, a community conversation," read the bold letters, inviting everyone to participate. Some officers were hesitant about the event, worried it might devolve into accusations and finger-pointing, but Lisa reassured them, emphasizing that true progress required vulnerability and honesty. On the day of the forum, the community center buzzed with anticipation. Rows of chairs filled up rapidly, and soon there was standing room only. Residents of all ages, races, and backgrounds gathered, united by a shared desire to be heard. When Lisa stepped onto the stage to introduce the event, the crowd fell silent. "Tonight is about listening," she said, her voice steady and warm. "Listening to each other, learning from our mistakes, and working together to build a better future. No matter what you've experienced, good or bad, we're here to hear your truth." Her words struck a chord, and one by one, people began to speak. A young mother recounted how an officer had helped her find her lost child during a chaotic holiday festival. An elderly man shared how a patrol car had escorted him home safely after his car broke down late at night. But there were also painful stories. A teenager described being unfairly stopped and searched simply because of the hoodie he wore, while a middle-aged woman tearfully recalled how officers dismissed her when she reported a burglary. Each story carried weight, painting a complex picture of the relationship between the community and its police force. Lisa listened intently, her heart aching at the accounts of harm caused, but swelling with pride at the moments of compassion and courage. By the end of the evening, something remarkable had happened. Strangers who had entered the room as individuals left as allies, bound by a collective commitment to healing and growth. Meanwhile, Greg Mitchell's life continued to spiral in unexpected directions. After moving out of Ridgewood, he settled in a small city several hours away, hoping to escape the shadow of his past. He found work as a security guard at a warehouse, a job that paid poorly, but allowed him to stay under the radar. At first he kept to himself, avoiding conversations and burying himself in routine tasks. But loneliness gnawed at him, forcing him to confront the emptiness he felt inside. One day, while taking a break in the employee lounge, he struck up a conversation with a co-worker named Marcus, a black man in his late 30s. They talked about sports, music, and eventually their families. Over time, Greg found himself opening up to Marcus in ways he never imagined possible. One afternoon, as they sat together during lunch, Greg hesitated before finally admitting, "I used to be a cop. I messed up big time. I let my biases get the best of me and it cost me everything." To his surprise, Marcus didn't judge him. Instead, he nodded thoughtfully and said, "We all make mistakes. What matters is what you do next." Greg took Marcus's words to heart, deciding it was time to take responsibility for his actions. He started volunteering at a local shelter on weekends, helping serve meals to the homeless. At first, he felt awkward and out of place, unsure of how to interact with the diverse group of people who came through the doors. But as he spent more time there, he began to see them not as statistics or stereotypes, but as individuals with hopes, dreams, and struggles. One evening, as he handed a plate of food to a young black woman, she smiled warmly and thanked him. For a brief moment, Greg saw Tanya's face in hers, and guilt washed over him again. Yet instead of retreating into shame, he forced himself to smile back and say, "You're welcome." It was a small gesture, but it marked the beginning of his journey toward redemption. Back in Ridgewood, Lisa and Tanya grew closer as they worked side by side on various community projects. Tanya had enrolled in college, pursuing a degree in social work, and Lisa couldn't have been prouder. Together, they organized workshops for teenagers, teaching them about empathy, advocacy, and the importance of standing up against injustice. Their partnership inspired others to join the cause, creating a ripple effect of positive change. 1. Saturday morning, as they stood side by side at a local park cleanup event, Tanya turned to Lisa and said, "Aunt Lisa, I think we're actually making a difference." Lisa smiled, her eyes glistening with tears. "We are, sweetheart, and we're just getting started." As they embraced, surrounded by volunteers of all ages and backgrounds, it became clear that Ridgewood wasn't just transforming, it was healing. The scars of the past remained, but they were fading, replaced by hope and a shared vision for a brighter tomorrow. In the end, the incident involving Greg and Tanya served as a catalyst for something greater than anyone could have anticipated. It exposed deep-seated issues within the community and challenged everyone to confront uncomfortable truths about themselves and the world around them. For Lisa, it reinforced her belief in the power of leadership and the importance of leading with integrity. For Tanya, it sparked a passion for justice and a determination to create opportunities for others. And for Greg, though his road to redemption was long and difficult, it taught him that change begins with self-awareness and humility. Life, as it often does, had delivered lessons in ways none of them expected, but each lesson carried the potential for growth, transformation, and renewal. As the seasons changed and another year approached, Ridgewood continued to evolve into a town that thrived on unity rather than division. The public forum Lisa had organized sparked a wave of initiatives aimed at fostering deeper connections between residents and law enforcement. Community leaders, inspired by the openness and honesty displayed during the event, began hosting regular meetings where officers and citizens could collaborate on projects ranging from neighborhood cleanups to mentorship programs for at-risk youth. These efforts weren't just about addressing grievances. They were about building trust through shared experiences. Officers who had once felt isolated or misunderstood found themselves welcomed into homes, invited to birthday parties, and even asked to coach local sports teams. For many, it was a revelation. They realized that being part of the community meant more than wearing a uniform. Lisa noticed how these small acts of kindness created ripples far beyond their immediate impact. A child who saw an officer playing catch with his friends no longer feared flashing lights when they passed by. A grandmother who chatted with a patrolman over coffee felt comfortable calling him directly when she spotted something suspicious in her neighborhood. These interactions may have seemed insignificant on the surface, but together, they wove a tapestry of mutual respect and understanding. Lisa often reminded her team that real change happened not in grand gestures, but in consistent, heartfelt actions. Every handshake, every conversation, every smile, it all matters, she would say during morning briefings. Her words resonated deeply with the officers, many of whom had begun to view their roles less as enforcers of rules and more as guardians of humanity. Tanya, meanwhile, flourished in her new role as a student advocate. Her passion for social justice led her to intern at a nonprofit organization focused on empowering marginalized communities. Through this work, she met people from all walks of life: immigrants struggling to navigate a foreign system, single mothers juggling multiple jobs, and teenagers grappling with identity and belonging. Each story added depth to her perspective, reinforcing her belief that everyone deserved dignity and opportunity. One evening, after returning home from a particularly emotional day at the nonprofit, Tanya sat down with Lisa to share some of what she'd learned. "Aunt Lisa, I think I finally understand why you do what you do," she said, her voice filled with admiration. "It's not just about fixing problems. It's about giving people hope. Hope that things can get better, that someone cares." Lisa smiled softly, placing a hand on Tanya's shoulder. "You're right, sweetheart. Hope is powerful. It keeps us moving forward, even when the road feels impossible." Greg Mitchell's journey toward redemption remained fraught with challenges, but he refused to give up. Volunteering at the shelter had become a lifeline, offering him a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. At first, he worried that others might judge him if they discovered his past, so he kept quiet about his history as a police officer. But one cold winter evening, as he served hot chocolate to a group of homeless men huddled around a space heater, one of them recognized him. "Hey, aren't you that cop who got fired?" the man asked bluntly, causing the room to fall silent. Greg froze, his cheeks burning with shame. He considered denying it, making up some excuse, but then he remembered Marcus's advice. "What matters is what you do next." Taking a deep breath, Greg nodded. "Yeah, that's me," he admitted. "I made a lot of mistakes, and I'm trying to make amends now." To his surprise, the man simply shrugged and said, "Well, you're doing good work here. That counts for something." The comment stunned Greg, filling him with a mix of relief and determination. From that moment on, he vowed to be completely transparent about his past, using it as a reminder of how far he still had to go. Back in Ridgewood, Lisa decided it was time to expand her efforts beyond the town's borders. She reached out to neighboring cities, proposing a regional coalition dedicated to combating systemic racism and promoting equitable policing practices. The response was overwhelmingly positive, with several departments eager to join forces. Together, they launched a series of joint training sessions, inviting experts from across the country to lead discussions on topics like implicit bias, trauma-informed care, and cultural competence. Officers from different towns exchanged stories and strategies, learning from each other's successes and failures. What started as a local movement quickly gained momentum, drawing attention from state officials and media outlets. Journalists flocked to Ridgewood, eager to document the transformation taking place. Lisa welcomed the spotlight, using it as an opportunity to amplify the voices of those who had long been ignored. In interviews, she emphasized that true progress required collaboration, not just within law enforcement but across society as a whole. Despite the growing recognition, Lisa remained grounded, always prioritizing the needs of her community above accolades. She understood that maintaining momentum was key, especially as resistance inevitably surfaced. Not everyone supported her reforms. Some officers grumbled about the extra workload, while a few vocal critics accused her of pandering to political correctness. But Lisa stood firm, reminding skeptics that discomfort was often a necessary step toward growth. "Change isn't easy," she told her team during a tense meeting. "But we didn't sign up for this job because it was easy. We signed up because we wanted to make a difference. If we're serious about protecting and serving, we need to be willing to challenge ourselves and each other." Her conviction silenced most objections, earning her even greater respect among her colleagues. Meanwhile, Tanya's advocacy work caught the eye of a local journalist, who wrote a feature article highlighting her journey and the lessons she had learned from her aunt. The piece went viral, sparking conversations nationwide about the importance of representation and accountability in law enforcement. Readers praised Tanya's courage and resilience, marveling at how she had turned a painful experience into fuel for positive change. Inspired by the response, Tanya partnered with Lisa to launch a podcast called Voices of Justice, where they interviewed activists, educators, and everyday heroes working to create a fairer world. Each episode ended with a call to action, encouraging listeners to engage with their own communities and contribute to meaningful change. The podcast quickly gained a loyal following, further amplifying their message of hope and empowerment. For Greg, the turning point came when he was invited to speak at a support group for former law enforcement officers struggling with guilt or burnout. Standing before a room full of broken men and women, he shared his story openly, admitting his biases and describing the steps he had taken to confront them. His vulnerability resonated deeply with the group, prompting others to open up about their own struggles. Afterward, several attendees thanked him, saying his honesty had given them the courage to face their demons. For the first time in years, Greg felt a glimmer of pride, not for who he had been, but for who he was becoming. Though he knew he could never undo the harm he had caused, he believed he could use his experiences to help others avoid similar pitfalls. By the end of the year, Ridgewood had become a beacon of hope, proving that change was possible even in the face of deep-rooted prejudice. Lisa, Tanya, and countless others had shown that healing required patience, persistence, and a willingness to listen. As fireworks lit up the sky on New Year's Eve, Lisa stood alongside Tanya, watching the crowd cheer and celebrate. They exchanged a knowing glance, silently acknowledging how far they, and their town, had come. The road ahead wouldn't always be smooth, but they faced it with unwavering optimism, confident that every step forward brought them closer to a brighter future. As the new year unfolded, Ridgewood's transformation continued to inspire those both near and far. The town had become a model for other communities, striving to bridge divides and foster genuine connections between law enforcement and residents. Lisa Monroe's leadership played a pivotal role in this shift, but it was the collective effort of everyone involved: officers, citizens, activists, and even former critics, that truly drove the change. People from neighboring towns began visiting Ridgewood to attend workshops and observe firsthand how collaboration could replace conflict. Some came out of curiosity. Others were desperate for solutions to their own struggles with mistrust and division. Whatever their reasons, they left with renewed hope and practical ideas they could implement back home. Word spread quickly, and soon Ridgewood found itself at the center of a growing movement, one that emphasized empathy, accountability, and shared responsibility. Tanya, now deeply immersed in her advocacy work, became a prominent figure in this movement. Her partnership with Lisa through the Voices of Justice podcast had given her a platform to amplify marginalized voices and challenge systemic inequities. Each episode tackled pressing issues like racial profiling, affordable housing, and access to education, featuring interviews with experts and everyday heroes alike. One particularly impactful episode focused on the ripple effects of small acts of kindness, a theme close to Tanya's heart. She recounted stories from listeners who had been inspired to reach out to neighbors, volunteer at shelters, or simply smile at strangers. These anecdotes reinforced her belief that individual actions, no matter how minor they seemed, could spark monumental change. The feedback poured in, with many expressing gratitude for the podcast's message of empowerment and encouragement. For Tanya, it was validation that her voice mattered and that she was making a difference. Meanwhile, Greg Mitchell's efforts to rebuild his life took an unexpected turn when he was invited to join a statewide task force aimed at addressing bias within law enforcement. Though initially hesitant, fearing judgment from peers, he accepted the offer after Marcus encouraged him to see it as an opportunity for growth. At first, the experience was daunting. Sitting alongside seasoned officers and policymakers, Greg often felt out of place, unsure if his contributions held any value. But as discussions unfolded, he realized his unique perspective. As someone who had once perpetuated harm and was now actively seeking redemption, offered valuable insights. He spoke candidly about his past mistakes, describing the biases that had clouded his judgment and the moment of reckoning that forced him to confront them. His honesty struck a chord with others, prompting candid conversations about the challenges of unlearning harmful behaviors. By the end of the first meeting, several members approached Greg to thank him for his courage, acknowledging that his story had inspired them to reflect on their own practices. Back in Ridgewood, Lisa launched another ambitious project, a youth mentorship program designed to connect at-risk teenagers with positive role models, including police officers. The initiative stemmed from her belief that early intervention could prevent cycles of mistrust and misunderstanding from taking root. Officers volunteered their time to coach sports teams, teach self-defense classes, and lead workshops on topics like financial literacy and career planning. The program quickly gained popularity, drawing participants from all corners of the community. One standout success story emerged from a young boy named Jamal, whose initial skepticism toward officers melted away after bonding with Officer Harris during basketball practice. Over time, Jamal began opening up about the pressures he faced at school and home, trusting Harris enough to seek guidance when conflicts arose. Witnessing such transformations filled Lisa with pride, reinforcing her conviction that investing in relationships could yield profound results. Despite the progress, challenges remained. Not everyone embraced the changes sweeping through Ridgewood. A vocal minority continued to resist, accusing Lisa and her supporters of prioritizing political correctness over public safety. Anonymous letters criticizing the reforms appeared in local newspapers, while heated debates erupted at town hall meetings. Some officers privately expressed frustration, feeling overwhelmed by the constant demand to prove themselves worthy of trust. Lisa listened to these concerns without judgment, reminding her team that resistance was a natural part of any transformative process. "Change is uncomfortable," she said during one particularly tense briefing. "But discomfort doesn't mean we're doing something wrong. It means we're stretching ourselves beyond what feels safe. That's where growth happens." Her words resonated with many, helping ease tensions and refocus energy on the ultimate goal, creating a safer, fairer community for everyone. For Tanya, navigating criticism proved equally challenging. As her profile grew, so did scrutiny of her motives and methods. Critics accused her of exploiting her personal trauma for attention, while skeptics questioned whether her advocacy efforts were sustainable in the long term. Rather than letting negativity discourage her, Tanya channeled it into fuel for perseverance. She reminded herself of the countless individuals who relied on her message of hope and resilience, vowing not to let detractors derail her mission. In moments of doubt, she turned to Lisa for support, finding strength in their shared commitment to justice. Together, they strategized ways to expand their reach, exploring partnerships with national organizations and leveraging social media to engage broader audiences. Their collaborative spirit became a source of inspiration for others, demonstrating the power of unity in overcoming adversity. Greg's journey also hit rough patches, though he faced them with newfound resolve. While volunteering at the shelter, he encountered a man who recognized him as the officer who had once poured water on Tanya. The confrontation left Greg shaken, forcing him to relive the shame and guilt he thought he'd moved past. For days afterward, he wrestled with doubts, wondering if he deserved forgiveness or redemption. It was Marcus who helped pull him out of the spiral, reminding him that healing wasn't linear. "You can't erase the past," Marcus said gently, "but you can shape the future. Every day you choose to do better is a victory." With renewed determination, Greg threw himself into his work, focusing on the lives he touched rather than the ones he had hurt. Slowly, he began to see glimpses of acceptance, not just from others but from himself. As summer approached, Ridgewood prepared to host its first annual Unity Festival, a celebration of diversity and resilience organized by Lisa and Tanya. The event featured live music, art exhibits, food stalls, and interactive booths where attendees could learn about local initiatives promoting equality and inclusion. Thousands gathered in the park, united by a shared vision of harmony and mutual respect. Amidst the laughter and applause, Lisa stood beside Tanya, watching as children danced freely under the sun and elders swapped stories over plates of homemade dishes. In that moment, surrounded by joy and connection, she felt a profound sense of fulfillment. This was what they had been working toward, a community bound not by fear or obligation, but by love and understanding. And though the road ahead would undoubtedly present new obstacles, Lisa knew they were ready to face them together, hand in hand, heart to heart. The Unity Festival marked a turning point for Ridgewood, solidifying its reputation as a beacon of progress and hope. The event wasn't just a celebration, it was a testament to the power of collective effort and unwavering determination. As people from all walks of life mingled in the park, sharing laughter, stories, and meals, it became clear that the town had undergone a profound transformation. Barriers that once seemed insurmountable had been dismantled, replaced by bridges built on trust and empathy. For Lisa Monroe, watching the festival unfold felt like witnessing the culmination of years of hard work. She walked through the crowd, greeting familiar faces and introducing herself to newcomers, her heart swelling with pride at what they had achieved together. Yet even in this moment of triumph, she remained acutely aware that their journey was far from over. Change, she knew, was an ongoing process, one that required constant vigilance and care. Tanya stood beside her aunt, soaking in the energy of the festival. The young woman who had once questioned whether anyone would believe her story now found herself surrounded by supporters eager to amplify her voice. Her advocacy work had grown exponentially since launching Voices of Justice, earning recognition not only locally but nationally. Schools began inviting her to speak at assemblies, where students listened intently as she shared lessons about resilience, compassion, and the importance of standing up against injustice. One particular visit to a high school left a lasting impression on Tanya. After her talk, a shy teenager approached her, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't think anyone cared about what happens to kids like me," the girl whispered. Tanya hugged her tightly, assuring her that she mattered, that everyone mattered. That interaction reinforced Tanya's belief that every person carried within them the potential to create change, no matter how small or overlooked they might feel. Greg Mitchell, too, experienced moments of redemption during the festival. Though he had initially hesitated to attend, fearing judgment or hostility, Marcus convinced him to embrace the opportunity to connect with others. To Greg's surprise, many attendees greeted him warmly, acknowledging his efforts to make amends. He spent hours manning a booth for the statewide task force, answering questions and sharing resources aimed at addressing bias within law enforcement. When a young boy stopped by to ask about becoming a police officer someday, Greg knelt down to meet him at eye level, speaking earnestly about the importance of integrity and fairness. Watching the child's eyes light up with admiration reminded Greg why he had joined the force in the first place, to protect and serve. It was a bittersweet realization, one that filled him with both regret and hope. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to imagine a future where he could contribute positively, free from the weight of past mistakes. As the sun set on the Unity Festival, casting a golden glow over the park, Lisa gathered her team for a quiet moment of reflection. Officers, volunteers, and community leaders formed a circle, holding hands as they shared thoughts about the day's events. Many expressed gratitude for the chance to be part of something greater than themselves, while others spoke candidly about the challenges they still faced. Lisa listened intently, nodding along as each person voiced their hopes and fears. When it was her turn to speak, she paused, searching for the right words. "Today showed us what's possible when we come together," she said finally, her voice steady yet emotional. "But let's not forget that real change happens in the everyday moments, the conversations we have, the kindness we show, the courage we muster to confront our biases. Let's carry this spirit forward, not just today, but every day." Her words resonated deeply, drawing murmurs of agreement from the group. In the weeks following the festival, Ridgewood continued to thrive as a model of collaboration and inclusivity. Other towns sought guidance from Lisa and her team, eager to replicate their success. Requests poured in for workshops, consultations, and speaking engagements, keeping the department busier than ever. Despite the demands, Lisa welcomed the opportunity, to share their story, knowing that every connection forged brought them closer to a more equitable society. Meanwhile, Tanya expanded Voices of Justice into a multimedia platform, incorporating video documentaries and live streams to reach wider audiences. Her message of empowerment touched lives across the globe, inspiring countless individuals to take action in their own communities. Together, Lisa and Tanya proved that leadership came in many forms, and that true progress required lifting others up alongside you. For Greg, the festival served as a catalyst for further growth. Encouraged by the positive reception he received, he decided to pursue formal training in conflict resolution and restorative justice. His decision surprised even himself, but Marcus reminded him that learning never stopped, especially when it came to personal evolution. As Greg delved deeper into his studies, he discovered new ways to address systemic issues, applying his insights to the statewide task force's initiatives. Slowly but surely, he earned the respect of colleagues who had once doubted his sincerity, proving that redemption was possible for those willing to put in the work. Though scars remained from his past actions, they no longer defined him. Instead, they served as reminders of how far he had come, and how much farther he still intended to go. As autumn arrived, painting Ridgewood's streets in hues of red and gold, the town prepared for another milestone, the unveiling of a mural dedicated to unity and resilience. Designed collaboratively by local artists and residents, the vibrant artwork depicted scenes of diversity, cooperation, and hope. At Trois, its center stood portraits of Lisa and Tanya, symbols of the leadership and courage that had guided Ridgewood through turbulent times. During the dedication ceremony, Lisa addressed the crowd, her voice filled with emotion. "This mural represents not just where we've been but where we're going," she said. "It reminds us that our strength lies in our differences and in our ability to embrace them." Applause erupted as she stepped back, allowing Tanya to take the microphone. With tears in her eyes, Tanya thanked everyone who had contributed to their shared journey, emphasizing that true change happened when people worked together toward a common goal. By year's end, Ridgewood had transformed into a shining example of what communities could achieve when united by purpose and compassion. The scars of prejudice and division hadn't disappeared entirely, but they had faded, overshadowed by acts of kindness and understanding. Lisa, Tanya, and countless others had shown that healing required patience, persistence, and a willingness to listen. They had proven that accountability wasn't a punishment but an invitation to grow, and that redemption was always within reach for those brave enough to seek it. As fireworks lit up the sky on New Year's Eve, signaling the start of another chapter, Lisa turned to Tanya with a smile. "We've come so far," she said softly, "but there's still so much more to do." Tanya nodded, her gaze fixed on the horizon. Together they faced the future with optimism, confident that every step forward brought them closer to a world where justice and humanity went hand in hand.